The first crack of dawn brought a gunshot echoing across the jagged ridges, slicing the morning mist like a whisper of death. Marlene Voss froze, her dark eyes snapping toward the sound as her pulse hammered in her chest. She had lived in the Silver Peak Mountains for nearly 5 years, tucked away in a solitary cabin that clung precariously to the rocky slopes. And yet the mountains had never sounded so alive or so threatening. The echoes of the gunshot rolled down the valley and mingled with the harsh cries of distant hawks. Carrying a warning she couldn't ignore, Marlene crouched behind the worn wooden door of her cabin, the grain rough against her palms. Dust clung to her jeans and boots, the smell of old pine and soot thick in the air. Her hand hovered over the rifle she kept close at all times, fingers trembling slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. Years of isolation had sharpened her senses, and she knew that the mountains were rarely silent for no reason. Someone had come into her refuge, and that someone was dangerous. Her sanctuary had been hard won. After leaving Fort Stanton, a place of failed promises and charred bridges, Marlene had sought out these mountains for their solitude. Here, surrounded by cliffs and evergreens, she had built a life away from towns, laws, and the endless prying eyes of strangers. Her cabin, modest but sturdy, was a testament to her determination. Rough-hewn logs, a stone hearth, and shelves lined with the few possessions she had deemed necessary. She had thought herself invisible to the world. Now, that illusion was shattered. The valley below stirred with movement. 2 figures emerged from the haze of dust and morning light. The first was a man on horseback, his hair dark and tied into a single braid, eyes sharp and calculating, adorned in simple leather and a few feathers that spoke of tribal heritage. The second was a stranger, wearing a weathered sheriff's badge and a grim expression, a hand resting lightly on the hilt of his revolver. Marlene's heart leapt. She had been careful, leaving no trace in nearby towns. How had they found her? And why? The Apache man, sensing her gaze, guided his horse closer, careful with each step over the rocky terrain. Marlene Voss? His voice was deep and resonant, like the echo of a canyon. Her breath caught. Her name, spoken aloud by someone she had never met, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Who wants to know?" she demanded, raising her rifle with steady hands despite the tremor in her chest. "My name is Takota," he said calmly. "I bring news regarding your family." The words twisted her gut into knots. Her family, her brother and parents, had been gone for years, claimed by fire and disease, leaving her with nothing but this cabin and the mountains. "My family is dead. Whatever message you have, you waste your time." Takota's gaze didn't waver. There was a flicker of unease in his dark eyes, but also a determination that unsettled her. "Not your blood family. Your kin among the Apache. They are coming, Marlene, and they bring with them questions only you can answer." A horn sounded from the valley below, long and haunting, vibrating against the cliff faces. Marlene instinctively ducked, her knuckles whitening around the rifle. The first wave of riders appeared over the ridge, a sea of black hair, feathers, and painted faces. 200 warriors, just as Takota had warned, moving like a living storm across the valley floor. Marlene's cabin suddenly felt impossibly small. Panic rose like a tide, threatening to drag her under. She could hear the stamping of hooves through the thin wooden walls, the distant shouts and the rhythmic chant of riders preparing for a charge. She had never been afraid of the outdoors, but fear of the unknown was an entirely different beast. Takota moved quickly to her side. "You must come with me," he said, voice low and urgent. "If they see you alone, they will think you are hiding something. They will not harm you, but they will not hesitate to force you out. Trust me." Before she could respond, the cabin door burst open with a sudden crash, splintering the frame slightly. Takota's Winchester barked once, twice, warning shots ringing across the ridge. The Apache warriors halted at the sight of the rifle, uncertainty flickering across their faces as dust and smoke rose between them. The leader of the Apache, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek and a scarlet ribbon across his chest, raised his hand, signaling his warriors to stop. Takota's breath hitched. "Kahawi," he muttered under his breath, recognition and disbelief mingling in his tone. The leader stepped forward, the muscles in his arms flexing beneath ceremonial paint. "Marlene Voss," he called out, voice deep, reverberating across the valley. "We seek the one who holds the knowledge of the lost water springs. Only she can save our people from what is coming." Marlene staggered back, confusion and terror warring in her mind. Lost water springs? Her father had told her stories as a child about hidden waters that could heal the land, places lost to most people except a few who knew the secret maps. She had never imagined that knowledge would ever matter, much less that she would be called upon to protect it. She tightened her grip on the rifle, her pulse racing. "I know nothing of springs or tribes. Leave me out of this," she demanded, her voice echoing in the morning air. Kahawi's eyes softened ever so slightly, and for a moment the fear she had felt began to shift to curiosity. "You know the maps, Marlene," he said quietly. "The old paths. The hidden springs. Without your guidance, our people will perish." Takota placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You can't refuse them," he said firmly, his gaze locking with hers. "If they believe you are hiding, they will not leave until they find you. Their patience will not last, and they are desperate. This is bigger than you or me. It's life and death." Marlene swallowed hard, her mind flashing to the memories of her father's tales, the maps he had painstakingly drawn and the knowledge he had entrusted to her. She had thought it was all legend, a story to keep a child entertained. But now, confronted by 200 warriors and a desperate tribe, the weight of responsibility settled over her like a stone. She stepped forward, slowly raising her hands. The cabin felt less like a refuge now and more like a cage that she had no choice but to leave. Kahawi's expression softened further, relief washing over his features as he regarded her. "You know the path," he said. "Show us and no harm will come to you." Marlene took a deep breath, feeling the mountain air fill her lungs with cold, crisp determination. She had lived alone for years, hiding from a world that had never treated her kindly. And yet now she found herself at the center of something far greater than herself. For a moment, she wondered if she was ready. Could she trust these warriors? Could she trust herself? She had survived the wilderness, but this was different. The mountains had never asked for her allegiance until now. Takota's hand remained on her shoulder, grounding her. "We'll be with you," he said, "step by step. You are not alone." The warriors remained below, silent now, watching. Their spears gleamed in the morning sun, their eyes fixed on her like flares of fire. Marlene's heart pounded, a rhythm matching the drumming of hooves and the whisper of the wind through the cliffs. Finally, she nodded. She would lead them, but not as a servant. She would lead them as the only one who could. And as she took her first steps down the rocky slope, rifle in hand, she knew that the mountains, her sanctuary, had changed forever. Somewhere deep in the mist below, the lost water springs waited, hidden and sacred. And she, Marlene Voss, was the only one who could reach it. The sun rose higher, burning away the last of the shadows, but in her mind, Marlene felt the weight of the unknown pressing close. Danger, mystery, and destiny intertwined in the jagged ridges around her, and there was no turning back. The journey had begun. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the thin veil of mist that had clung stubbornly to the mountain ridges. Marlene Voss stood at the threshold of her cabin, the cool wind whipping strands of her dark hair across her face. Her hands were raw from gripping her rifle, and the dust from the valley below had settled into a fine film over her skin. Outside, the sound of hooves echoed like distant thunder, a constant reminder that 200 Apache warriors waited below. Their painted faces, feathers, and steady, disciplined movement marked them as both friends and a force of nature she could not control. Takota stayed close, his hand resting lightly on the rifle she carried. "They're patient," he said quietly, though his eyes scanned the horizon, always alert. "For now. But patience can run thin when desperation rises." Marlene shook her head, trying to steel herself. "I didn't ask for this. I never wanted this," she muttered, though the words felt hollow even as they left her lips. She knew Takota was right. These warriors would not leave until she showed them the hidden paths to the lost water springs. And she had no choice but to lead them. From the ridge above, Kahawi's voice called down. "Marlene, we mean no harm. We only seek the water." His tone was deep, commanding, but softened by urgency. "Guide us, and we will protect you." Her chest tightened. The reality of 200 men below her cabin, their eyes fixed on her, the rhythmic pounding of their horses' hooves, it was overwhelming. She had lived alone in these mountains for years, and yet the mountains themselves now felt like a cage. Takota gave her a reassuring look. "We'll make camp tonight," he said. "Inside. I'll fortify the cabin while we wait for them to calm. You stay hidden." Hours stretched. The warriors circled the ridge, never advancing but never retreating. Their movements were like shadows dancing across the rocks, and Marlene could see the determination in every set jaw and tense posture. She moved quietly inside, rearranging furniture to block the door and drawing the curtains across the windows. Dust swirled in the warm sunlight, and the smell of pine and smoke from her small stove mingled in the air. Takota worked alongside her, checking the locks and reinforcing the cabin. "They will not attack if they see you are ready," he said, though the faint worry in his voice betrayed him. "But if they sense weakness—" Marlene nodded, understanding the unspoken words. 200 warriors were not a force to underestimate, even if they were allies. She had survived storms, wild animals, and winter cold, but this was different. It was the weight of human desperation, of a people on the edge of survival. By midday, the warriors' patience began to fray. Kahawi's voice rose, commanding and deliberate. "Marlene, you have knowledge we need. We are dying without it. The water is poisoned and our people suffer." Marlene clenched her jaw. She had heard tales of the lost water springs from her father, secret maps hidden in leather pouches, paths through cliffs and valleys that only she could navigate. To refuse them now was unthinkable. Yet stepping into this role, the guide, the protector, the one carrying the key to survival, terrified her. She turned to Takota. "Can I trust them?" she whispered, barely moving her lips. He nodded slowly. "They are Apache. Honor binds them more than laws ever could. They will not harm you, Marlene, but they will not wait forever. You must choose." Marlene took a deep breath and straightened. She would not hide. She would not run. She had survived the wilderness for years, learning to read every shadow, every wind shift, every sound of stone against stone. Now she would survive humanity as well. She stepped outside, her hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. The warriors fell silent at her appearance, their painted faces and burning eyes fixed upon her. Kahawi's expression softened, relief flickering across the scarred lines of his face. "You know the paths," he said simply. "Show us. Protect the waters, and you will have my word. None shall harm you." Marlene swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest like a boulder. The mountains were beautiful, cruel, and alive with history, and she had always believed she was alone in their embrace. Now she was center stage in the story she had never imagined, a story that could determine the fate of 200 families. Takota's hand found hers, steadying her. "We start at first light," he said. "They will follow. You will guide them safely." Night came, and with it a tense quiet. The warriors had settled into a hidden hollow, their horses tethered and fires burning low. The glow of the flames flickered across their painted faces, shadows dancing like ghosts. Marlene stood nearby, studying each one. She could see fear mingled with determination, the desperation of people who had no choice but to trust her, despite having just met her. Kahawi approached, careful to stay unthreatening. "You are brave," he said softly, "to risk your life for people you have never met." Marlene lowered her gaze to the ground, her hands gripping the edge of a wooden crate for support. "I didn't choose this," she admitted. "I only know the paths. That's all I can offer." Takota joined them, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. "There are others who know about the springs," he said, voice low. "Bandits, prospectors. Anyone who hears of the water could come for it. We must be ready." Marlene shivered despite the fire. She had always felt the mountains watched her, but now it seemed as though every shadow might conceal a threat. The wind shifted, carrying a strange sound that made her heart tighten, a low whisper, like the mountains themselves were speaking. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, moving silently over the rocks. Another Apache, painted in grays and blacks, stepped into the firelight. "They are here," the stranger said, voice low but urgent. "And they are not alone." The camp erupted into motion. Takota raised his rifle, warriors drew knives and arrows, and Marlene's pulse thundered in her ears. She realized instantly that this was no ordinary threat. These intruders knew the value of the water, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. Kahawi's face darkened with determination. "Form a line. Protect the women in the path," he commanded. "Marlene, you will guide us to safety. Takota, stay close to her. No one touches the springs until we reach them." For the rest of the night, the cabin became a fortress. Marlene, Takota, and Kahawi moved among the warriors, setting traps and preparing for any attack. The Apache warriors, disciplined and skilled, created a protective perimeter around her, their presence both a comfort and a reminder of the stakes. The moon rose high, casting silver shadows across the mountain slopes, and every rustle in the brush sent a jolt through the camp. Marlene sat by the small hearth, her fingers absently tracing the worn maps her father had left her. She knew the paths, the hidden ledges, the secret caves that could provide safety and cover. She also knew that failure meant death, not just for her, but for the tribe she had just begun to trust. Takota knelt beside her. "We can do this," he said quietly. "We know the mountains. We have the warriors. And you know the paths. We'll get through it together." Marlene allowed herself a brief nod, the smallest spark of resolve igniting in her chest. The road ahead was perilous, the bandits and dangers unknown, but she would not falter. Not now, not when the lives of so many depended on her knowledge and courage. Outside, the warriors kept watch, their chants and songs quiet but steady, carrying a rhythm that matched the pulse of the mountains. Marlene realized with a mixture of fear and awe that she had stepped into a story far greater than herself. She was no longer just a woman hiding in the mountains. She was a guide, a protector, a key to survival. And the mountains themselves would be her ally if she listened closely. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the peaks, Marlene looked toward the ridge where the lost water springs lay hidden. The path would be treacherous, filled with unseen dangers and tests of endurance. Yet, for the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose deeper than mere survival. The journey had begun. The dawn mist clung stubbornly to the cliffs as Marlene led the Apache warriors along the narrow, winding path that carved through the Silver Peak Mountains. Every step was precarious. Loose stones threatened to send a horse tumbling into the valley below. The horse's hooves struck the rocky ground with sharp clatters, echoing against the cliffs like muted drums, each sound amplifying the tension that wrapped around the group like a suffocating shroud. Marlene's heart pounded in time with the horses, her dark eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow, every curve in the trail. She had memorized these mountains as a child, learning the paths her father had shown her, hidden routes to caves and creeks that would remain invisible to anyone not trained to see them. Now her knowledge was a lifeline not just for herself, but for 200 lives, carried along by the disciplined but tense Apache warriors who trusted her guidance implicitly. Takota rode beside her, silent and vigilant, his sharp eyes sweeping the slopes. He spoke only when necessary, issuing quiet warnings when the path narrowed or a loose stone threatened to roll beneath a horse's hooves. Despite the tension, there was a steady calm about him, a reassurance Marlene clung to, though her pulse refused to slow. Kahaw, I brought up the rear, a figure of stoic authority. His gaze swept over the mountains, scanning for threats with a precision honed by years of leadership. Every so often, he would call out instructions to the warriors, ensuring formation and vigilance. Marlene noticed how even he, the leader of the tribe, carried a tension in his shoulders that mirrored her own. This path was treacherous, and danger lurked not only in the jagged cliffs, but also in the world beyond these mountains. By midday, the group had reached a hidden hollow, a narrow plateau tucked between cliffs that offered a temporary reprieve. Fires were lit and the warriors settled their horses, though rest was short-lived. Marlene knelt by a small rocky stream, dipping her hands into the icy water and feeling its sharp chill bite through her fingers. This small pool reminded her of the lost water springs, though the true springs remained hidden further along the treacherous path. Kahawi approached quietly, his heavy boots crunching against loose gravel. "You have done well," he said, voice low but carrying a weight of respect. "Your knowledge guides us, Marlene. Without it, we would be lost." Marlene shook her head. "I am only a guide. I do not fight. I cannot defend you from what comes." Takota's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "You do more than you know," he said. "Your knowledge is what keeps us alive. That is just as important as the warriors' bows and knives." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying an unfamiliar sound, a soft rustle of movement from the cliffs above. Marlene froze, listening. The mountains had always spoken to her in subtle ways, and now their language screamed of danger. "They're coming," she whispered, barely moving her lips. Takota's eyes narrowed. "Bandits," he said. "Or worse, prospectors who know about the springs and intend to take them by force." Kahawi moved swiftly to a vantage point, signaling warriors to take positions along the higher rocks. "No one moves without my command," he said, his voice carrying authority that left no room for argument. "Prepare yourselves. We defend the path or no one reaches the springs." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the mountains, the threat became visible. Figures crept along the cliffs, moving silently and deliberately, eyes fixed on the group below. There were a dozen of them, armed with rifles and knives, their intent clear: seize the springs at any cost. Marlene felt a surge of fear, but also determination. She knew these mountains better than anyone, and she had trained her mind to anticipate every shift in rock, every hidden ledge. "We can outmaneuver them," she said, her voice steady. "Follow me and stay close. The cliffs will protect us if we use them." Takota nodded, his hand tightening on his rifle. Kahawi barked orders and the warriors formed a defensive perimeter. using boulders and the natural terrain to cover the horses and the slower members of the group. The bandits advanced, unaware of the traps Marlene had begun to prepare. Loose stones, hidden pits, and carefully arranged branches would slow or injure anyone attempting to pursue. The first of them stepped on a loose rock, sending it clattering down the slope, alerting the warriors to their approach. Kahawi raised a hand, signaling a halt. "Wait for them to enter the pass," he said. "Do not fire prematurely." Marlene's pulse hammered in her ears. She guided the warriors silently through a narrow corridor of rock, twisting and turning so that the bandits had no line of sight. Every step was calculated, every move precise. The mountains themselves became a weapon in their defense, concealing their movement while exposing the enemy's every misstep. Night fell abruptly, bringing with it a chill that gnawed at bones and sapped energy. Fires were lit, but the glow was small, barely pushing back the darkness. Marlene huddled close to Takota, whispering instructions to the warriors and mapping the final stretches to the hidden springs in her mind. Every creak of a branch, every snap of stone against stone made her flinch. The intruders were patient, they would follow, but she knew they would make mistakes. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the shadows, startling both humans and horses. A bullet ricocheted off a boulder near the warriors, sending sparks into the air. Marlene ducked instinctively, heart racing. "They're testing us," she whispered. "They're trying to see how alert we are." Takota's rifle barked in reply, a warning shot meant to halt their advance. Kahawi's voice rose, commanding and authoritative. "Hold your positions. Wait until they are within the pass." The bandits hesitated, uncertain. Marlene took a deep breath, recalling every lesson her father had taught her: patience, observation, and the ability to turn the terrain into an advantage. She gestured to the warriors, signaling them to advance quietly along a hidden path, leading the intruders into a narrow gorge where escape would be impossible. As the first of the bandits stumbled into the trap, falling into a hidden pit she had prepared, Marlene felt a grim satisfaction. It was not joy, she did not celebrate death, but the knowledge that her guidance had kept 200 people safe. Takota rode beside her, eyes scanning for any signs of further danger. "We are not yet safe," he reminded her. "They may regroup." Marlene nodded, already plotting the next stages of the journey. The mountains demanded vigilance, and she was determined not to fail. By the time the moon rose, silver light casting shadows across the jagged cliffs, the group had established a temporary camp in a narrow hidden hollow. Fires burned low, and the warriors settled in, exhausted but alert. Marlene knelt beside a small pool of water, washing her hands and face, the icy chill cutting through the fatigue. She realized that every step forward brought them closer to the lost water springs and closer to unimaginable danger. Kahawi approached quietly, his expression softening as he regarded her. "You have done well today," he said. "Your courage and knowledge guide us more than any warrior's skill. Rest now, for tomorrow we move again. The springs are near, but the path will test us all." Marlene looked up at the starlit sky, a mixture of fear and determination burning within her. The mountains were alive with secrets, and she was the key to unlocking them. She would lead these warriors, face the bandits, and protect the springs at all costs. For the first time in years, she felt a purpose deeper than mere survival. Takota joined her, a reassuring presence in the quiet night. "We will get through this," he said. "The springs are within reach, and your guidance makes it possible." Marlene allowed herself a brief nod. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest, but also a strange exhilaration. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and human greed, and she had prevailed. If only for now, the journey was far from over. The mountains would test them, the bandits would return, and the lost water springs awaited, hidden and guarded. But Marlene knew, with a clarity that steadied her nerves, that she could face whatever lay ahead. She was no longer just a woman hiding in the mountains. She was a guide, a protector, and the keeper of a secret that could save a people. And tomorrow, the real test would begin. The sun broke over the jagged peaks of the Silver Peak Mountains, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Marlene's breath came in sharp bursts as she led the Apache warriors down a narrow gorge, the final leg of the treacherous journey to the Lost Water Springs. The air smelled of pine and stone, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of blood from the skirmishes they had endured the previous night. Every sense was heightened. The wind carried every sound, every movement, and she knew that the bandits were not done. Takota rode beside her, silent but vigilant. His dark eyes scanned every ridge and hollow, scanning for movement or unnatural shifts in the terrain. "They may have regrouped," he murmured. "We cannot let our guard down until we reach the springs." Marlene nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. She had guided them this far, navigating cliffs, hidden trails, and natural traps with precision. But the final approach to the springs was the most dangerous. The valley narrowed sharply here, cliffs rising on either side, leaving no room for error. One wrong step could send them plummeting into the gorge below. Kahaw, I brought up the rear, riding with authority that commanded respect and instilled calm among the warriors. "Stay alert," he warned. "The water is close. Protect the guide at all costs." His voice carried a weight that silenced even the murmurs of the exhausted warriors. The Lost Water Springs were legendary, hidden deep within the mountains, and their secret had been guarded by generations. Marlene's father had once shown her the faded leather maps, paths worn by time, and secret crevices that could hide the springs from any outsider. Now her knowledge was the key to survival, not just for the Apache, but for herself and for the warriors who trusted her implicitly. As the group descended, Marlene signaled a halt. Her sharp eyes had caught movement figures creeping along the far ridge, rifles glinting in the sun. Bandits. They had followed them relentlessly. Greedy for the water's power and unaware of the traps Marlene had set along the mountain trails, Takota's rifle was raised in an instant. "We don't have much time," he said, voice low and urgent. "If they reach the springs before us—" Kahawi's hand rested on his bow. "Then they will find death instead of water," he said firmly, his dark eyes blazing with determination. "Marlene, lead us through the hidden pass, now." Marlene took a deep breath and pointed to a narrow, jagged path carved into the mountainside, partially obscured by overhanging rocks and dense pines. "This way," she said. "It's barely wide enough for one horse at a time, but it will give us cover." The warriors moved with precision, following her lead, while the bandits, unaware of the trap, advanced along the main path below. Rocks she had loosened earlier now teetered on the edge, ready to cascade down at the slightest nudge. Marlene's pulse raced. Each step could trigger disaster if not calculated perfectly. Suddenly, a shot rang out from above. The bandits had noticed the warriors' movement. A bullet ricocheted off a boulder, sending sparks into the sunlight. Takota returned fire with deadly accuracy, sending the first wave of intruders stumbling back. The mountains themselves seemed to aid their defense, echoing every shot and masking their movements. Marlene pressed forward, heart hammering. She could see the first glimpse of the springs, a shimmering pool hidden within a rocky alcove, water sparkling like liquid crystal, surrounded by moss and twisted roots. Relief and awe washed over her, but there was no time to linger. Kahawi's voice cut through the tension. "Form the perimeter around the water. Protect the guide at all costs." The warriors moved swiftly, creating a defensive circle around Marlene and the pool. The bandits, realizing the trap, advanced aggressively, but the narrow gorge prevented them from overwhelming the defenders. Marlene's hand shook as she guided the warriors, pointing out the safest routes, warning of loose stones and hidden pitfalls. A skirmish erupted as the bandits attempted to scale the cliffs, only to fall victim to hidden pits and rolling stones Marlene had prepared. Takota's rifle fired with unerring precision, each shot a testament to his skill and calm under pressure. Kahawi's bow sang with deadly accuracy, felling any who approached too closely. The mountains roared with the chaos of battle, but the warriors held firm. Finally, the last of the bandits fell, retreating down the rocky path, defeated and humiliated. Marlene sank to her knees beside the water, letting the icy flow run over her hands. It was real crystal clear, pure, alive. The lost water springs, hidden for generations, had been protected. Kahawi approached, his heavy boots crunching on the stones. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done what no one else could," he said quietly. "You have saved our people." Marlene looked up at him, exhaustion and relief mingling in her gaze. "I only guided you," she said. "I didn't fight for the water." "That was you, Takota, and all of them." Takota stepped beside her, brushing mud and sweat from his brow. "You led us here," he said simply. "Without you, we would have been lost. Your knowledge, your courage, it saved us all." The warriors knelt and began filling vessels with water, their movements careful and reverent. Marlene felt a strange warmth settle in her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and belonging. She had been alone in these mountains for years, yet now she was surrounded by people who respected her, trusted her, and depended on her. Kahawi rose, turning to address his warriors. "This water is life itself. Let no greed or violence touch it again. It will sustain our people, and you have ensured its safety." He looked back at Marlene. "And you, guide of the lost path, will always be part of our tribe's history. Your name will be remembered." Marlene felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had sought solitude, running from a world that had failed her, yet here she was essential, honored, and needed. The mountains no longer felt like a cage but a home, alive with the memory of those who had protected it and those who would continue to do so. Takota nudged her gently. "We have a long journey back," he said. "The springs are safe, but the path remains treacherous. You must rest." Marlene nodded, standing with renewed strength. She could feel the mountains around her, the wind through the pines, the whispers of the past guiding her. Every challenge, every danger, every step had led her here to a place of purpose she had never imagined. The warriors began their careful descent, the horses navigating the hidden paths under Marlene's guidance. Kahawi rode beside her, his eyes scanning the cliffs with unwavering focus. The bandits were gone, but the mountains themselves demanded respect, and every step required vigilance. As they neared the ridge where the journey had begun, Marlene looked back at the hidden alcove where the springs sparkled in the sunlight. She knew that this secret, guarded by generations, had been entrusted to her hands and to those who had proven worthy of its protection. Kahawi finally spoke, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. "You are more than a guide. You are the protector of life itself. The tribe owes you a debt that cannot be measured." Marlene felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of humility and pride. She had survived fear, uncertainty, and the isolation she had once believed would protect her. Now she had found purpose, belonging, and a connection to a people who honored her courage. Takota's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured together. "We made it," he said softly. "Thanks to you." Marlene allowed herself a deep, steadying breath. The mountains had tested her, the bandits had challenged them, and the lost water springs had demanded respect. But she had endured, guided, and survived. And in that survival, She had found something she had long thought lost, a place where she belonged. The Apache warriors returned to their village in the valley, carrying the precious water and the story of Marlene Voss, the woman who had led them through the mountains and protected the secret of the lost water springs. Tales would be told of her courage, her knowledge, and the unwavering spirit that had guided them through danger. And in the quiet of the mountains, Marlene stood, watching the sunlight dance across the cliffs. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. The journey was over. The springs were safe. And she, Marlene Voss, had finally found her home. The mountains whispered around her, alive with the echoes of history, survival, and courage. She had faced the shadows, guided the lost, and emerged not just alive, but transformed. The legend of the lost water springs and the woman who had protected them would endure for generations to come.